I never thought my world would shatter on a regular Tuesday afternoon. But that's the thing about life-changing moments, they don't wait for special occasions. My name is Avery, and I was 17 when my mother decided to rewrite our entire lives without bothering to use a pencil first. I remember walking up our cracked driveway after school, my backpack heavy with AP calculus homework, when I noticed an unfamiliar black SUV parked in my dad's old spot. Nobody had parked there since he passed away last year. Mom had been pretty clear about keeping that space empty, like some sort of memorial. The front door was unlocked, which was weird because Mom usually worked late at the hospital. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard laughter coming from our kitchen, not just Mom's, but other voices too. Male. Female. Strangers. Avery. Perfect timing. Mom called out. She appeared in the hallway, practically glowing. I hadn't seen her smile like that since before Dad got sick. Come meet everyone. Everyone? Since when did we have an everyone? I followed her into the kitchen, where a tall man in an expensive-looking suit was leaning against our counter like he owned it. Next to him stood a girl maybe 3 years younger than me, wearing the kind of clothes I could only window shop at the mall. Honey, this is Ethan, Mom said, practically bouncing on her toes. And his daughter, Chloe. Ethan stepped forward, hand extended. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Avery. Your mother has told me so much about you. Finally? How long had this been going on? And there's something else we want to tell you, Mom continued, grabbing Ethan's arm. That's when I noticed it, the diamond ring catching the afternoon light. My stomach dropped. We're getting married, Mom announced. And Ethan and Chloe are moving in this weekend. Isn't it wonderful? The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. Chloe was examining her nails, looking about as thrilled as I felt. Ethan's smile seemed practiced, like something from a toothpaste commercial. Moving in? I repeated. This weekend? I know it seems sudden, Mom said, her smile faltering slightly. But when you know, you just know. Right, honey. She looked at Ethan adoringly. Absolutely, he agreed, kissing her cheek. And Avery, I want you to know that I'm not trying to replace your father. I just want to make your mother happy and hopefully become a friend to you. Friend? My father's body wasn't even cold in his grave, and this stranger was standing in our kitchen, wearing my dad's smile. Planning to sleep in my dad's bed. Where's Chloe staying? I asked, already knowing the answer. We thought you girls could share your room. Mom said brightly. It'll be like having a sister. Chloe's head snapped up. Wait, what? Dad, you said I'd get my own room. Princess, we talked about this, Ethan said smoothly. It's just temporary until we figure out the sleeping arrangements. My room. The only place I had left that was still mine, still connected to who I used to be when Dad was alive. And now I was supposed to share it with a stranger? I have homework, I mumbled, turning to leave. Avery, wait, Mom called after me. Don't you want to stay and chat? Get to know your new family? New family. The words hit me like a physical blow. I already had a family, I said quietly, not turning around. And Dad's only been gone 14 months. I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath, followed by Ethan's murmured consolations. As I climbed the stairs to my room, our room now, I guess, I could hear them all down there, planning their perfect new life together. I sat on my bed, staring at the photo of Dad and me from my 16th birthday. He was smiling, really smiling, not that fake toothpaste commercial smile Ethan had perfected. My phone buzzed. A text from Grandpa Walter, how was school today, kiddo? I looked at the message for a long moment, then started typing, Grandpa, can I come over? I need to talk to you about Mom. Grandpa Walter's house always smelled like old books and coffee. It was the one place that still felt like home since Dad died, and as I sat in his worn leather armchair, clutching a mug of hot chocolate, I could almost pretend everything was normal. She didn't even ask me, Grandpa, I said, watching him settle into his usual spot by the window. One minute I'm thinking about calculus, the next I've got a whole new family. He adjusted his reading glasses, his eyes kind but concerned. Your mother's always been impulsive when she's hurting. Remember the time she bought that ridiculous sports car after your grandmother passed? At least the car didn't try to take over my bedroom, I muttered. A week had passed since Ethan and Chloe moved in, and everything felt wrong. The house was filled with unfamiliar sounds, Chloe's loud phone conversations, Ethan's business calls. The constant rearranging of furniture to accommodate their belongings. How's the room-sharing situation working out? Grandpa asked. I pulled out my phone and showed him a picture. She's taken over 3/4 of the closet, covered every surface with her makeup, and plays these weird ASMR videos to fall asleep. ASMR? Trust me, you don't want to know. The front door chimed, and Mom walked in without knocking. She never did anymore, even though this was her father's house. I thought I'd find you here, she said, her smile tight. Honey, we're having a family dinner tonight. Ethan's bringing his parents over. I have a calc test tomorrow, I said, not meeting her eyes. Avery, please. This is important to me. She turned to Grandpa. Dad, you should come too. It would mean a lot to have everyone there. Before Grandpa could respond, voices drifted in from outside. Through the window, I saw Ethan and Chloe walking up the path to the house. They weren't supposed to be here. I just wanted to see the property, Ethan was saying as they entered. Walter, your house is beautiful. Such potential. Potential? Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. Thank you, Grandpa said carefully. It served me well these past 30 years. Have you ever thought about selling? Ethan asked, his eyes scanning the room like he was taking inventory. The market in this area is incredible right now. Mom shot him a warning look. Ethan, we talked about this. About what? I asked, looking between them. Nothing, sweetheart, Mom said quickly. Ethan's just interested in real estate. But I saw the way Ethan's hand rested possessively on Mom's waist, the way she wouldn't meet Grandpa's eyes. Something was happening here that nobody wanted to tell me. Actually, Ethan continued, ignoring Mom's attempt to change the subject, I know a developer who'd be very interested in this location. The lot size alone. This house isn't for sale, I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. Of course not, Mom said soothingly. Nobody's selling anything. Now, about dinner tonight. I think I heard you wrong earlier, Grandpa said, his voice unusually stern. It sounded like you were suggesting I sell my home. The room grew tense. Chloe, who had been texting in the corner, finally looked up, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Dad, Mom said, we should discuss this later. Discuss what? I demanded. What's going on? Ethan cleared his throat. We're just exploring options. With the wedding coming up, we thought it might be nice to pool our resources. Maybe find a bigger place where we could all live together. All live together? I echoed. The hot chocolate in my stomach turned sour. It was just an idea, Mom said quickly. Nothing's decided. But I saw it now, the way Ethan looked at the house, at Grandpa, at me. We were all just pieces on his chessboard, waiting to be moved around. I should go study, I said, standing up. For that calc test you don't want me to take. As I left, I heard Ethan start talking about property values again. But it was Mom's silence that worried me most. The same silence she'd had when she let them take Dad's clothes to Goodwill, when she packed away his photos. When she parked that black SUV in his spot. I pulled out my phone and started recording as I walked away. Something told me I might need evidence of this conversation later. I never meant to find the email. I was just looking for the password to my college fund account, the one Dad set up before he died. Mom was supposed to give me access when I turned 17, but she kept forgetting to share the login details. That's when I saw it in her inbox, Re, Thompson College Fund Transfer Request. My hands shook as I clicked. The message was from our family accountant, dated 3 days ago. Lydia, I must advise against withdrawing from Avery's college fund. James was very specific about these funds being used solely for Avery's education. Additionally, using this money for Chloe's dance academy and competition fees could have legal implications. The room spun. Dance academy? Competition fees? What are you doing? I jumped. Chloe stood in the doorway, wearing one of her designer outfits that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Nothing, I said, closing the laptop too quickly. She crossed her arms. Were you going through Lydia's emails? I should tell my dad. Go ahead, I shot back. Tell him how you're getting my college money for your dance classes. Her face went pale. What? Don't pretend you didn't know. She looked away. Dad said Lydia offered. He said she wanted to support my dancing because she never had opportunities like that growing up. That wasn't her money to offer. Heavy footsteps on the stairs made us both turn. Mom appeared, still in her hospital scrubs. Girls? Everything okay, up here? Tell her, I said to Chloe. When she stayed silent, I turned to Mom. Want to explain why you're stealing my college fund? Mom's face did that thing it always did when she was caught, a flash of guilt, quickly replaced by defensive anger. I'm not stealing anything. I'm making decisions for this family. My college fund isn't family money. Dad left it for my education. Your father. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Your father isn't here anymore, Avery. Things change. Families change. Chloe has real talent. And I don't? My voice cracked. I'm getting straight A's. I'm applying to Dad's alma mater. I'm doing everything he wanted. Everything he wanted? Mom's voice rose. What about what I want? What about moving forward instead of living in the past? Moving forward doesn't mean erasing him. Nobody's erasing anything, Ethan said, appearing behind Mom. Of course he was here. He was always here now. We're just trying to build something new. Together. By stealing my future? Don't be dramatic, Mom snapped. We're not stealing anything. We're redistributing resources to benefit everyone. Benefit everyone? I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. You mean benefit Chloe? Perfect Chloe, who needs expensive dance classes and competitions, and I never asked for this. Chloe burst out. I didn't ask to move here or share a room or take anyone's money. She ran past us, down the stairs. The front door slammed. Now look what you've done, Mom said. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I'll go check on her, he said, already heading downstairs. Mom turned back to me, her face hard. This discussion is over. The decision's been made. Just like the decision to get engaged? To move them in? To sell Grandpa's house? That's enough. She stepped closer, finger pointed. I am still your mother. No, I said quietly. My mother died with Dad. I don't know who you are anymore. I pushed past her, grabbing my jacket and keys. Behind me, I heard her calling my name, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My feet carried me automatically to Grandpa Walter's house, vision blurry with tears. He opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. She's using my college fund, I sobbed into his shoulder. Dad's money. She's giving it to Chloe. His arms tightened around me. Then it's time, he said quietly, to show them your father's other letter. I pulled back, wiping my eyes. What other letter? Grandpa's expression was grim. The one he wrote when he knew he was dying. The one about protecting you, and your future, no matter what. Dad's letter trembled in my hands as I sat in Grandpa Walter's study. The paper was worn at the creases, like Grandpa had read it many times before showing it to me. Your mother doesn't know about this, Grandpa said, settling into his chair. James asked me to keep it safe until you needed it. The letter detailed everything: a separate trust fund Dad had set up before he died, one that Mom couldn't touch. One that would ensure I could go to college without depending on anyone else. He'd known, somehow. Known that Mom might try to reshape our lives after he was gone. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, looking up from the paper. Because your father asked me to wait. He wanted you to try to maintain a relationship with your mother if possible. Grandpa adjusted his glasses. But now. My phone buzzed, another missed call from Mom. I'd been ignoring them all morning. I can't go back there, I said quietly. Not after what she tried to do with the college fund. You don't have to. Grandpa leaned forward. Your old room here is still yours. Always has been. A knock at the front door made us both jump. Through the window, I saw Mom's car in the driveway. I'll handle this, Grandpa said, standing up. I heard their voices in the hallway, Mom's urgent whispers, Grandpa's firm responses. Then Ethan's voice joined them. Of course he was here too. She's 17, Dad, Mom was saying. She can't just decide to. Actually, she can. I stepped into the hallway, Dad's letter clutched in my hand. And I am. Mom's eyes fixed on the paper. What's that? Insurance, I said. Against exactly what you tried to do. Ethan stepped forward, all smooth concern. Avery, you're upset. We understand. But running away isn't the answer. I'm not running away. I'm choosing to live with my grandfather. Don't be ridiculous, Mom snapped. You're coming home right now. That's not home anymore. It's just a house where I don't have a room, don't have a voice, and apparently don't have a future unless it fits your new family's plans. What letter is that? Mom demanded, reaching for it. I stepped back. Dad's letter. The one he wrote explaining the trust fund he set up for me. The one you can't touch. The color drained from her face. What? He knew, Mom. He knew you tried to change everything after he was gone. So he made sure I'd be protected. Ethan's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to catch the calculation behind his concerned facade. Lydia, he said softly, maybe we should discuss this at home. There's nothing to discuss, I cut in. I'm staying here with Grandpa. My college fund, the one you tried to take, stays untouched. And the trust fund stays where it is. You can't just, Mom started. Actually, she can, Grandpa interrupted. The paperwork's already filed. I'm her legal guardian now. Mom staggered back like she'd been slapped. You went behind my back? Like you went behind mine with my college fund? Silence fell. Through the window, I saw Chloe sitting in the car, watching us. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. This isn't over, Mom said finally, her voice shaking. You're my daughter. Then start acting like it. I opened the front door. Start putting me first sometimes, instead of your new life with Ethan. They left, Mom crying, Ethan guiding her to the car with his hand on her back. As they pulled away, I saw him checking his phone, probably already calculating how this would affect his plans. Grandpa's hand settled on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded, though my hands were still shaking. Dad knew this might happen. He tried to protect me even after. I couldn't finish. He did protect you, Grandpa said quietly. And so will I. I looked around the familiar study, at the photos of Dad and me on the walls, at the college brochures Grandpa had already collected for me. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I should start moving my things, I said. Already cleared out the garage for you. Grandpa smiled. Welcome home, kiddo. 3 months living with Grandpa Walter had given me a new normal. My grades were up, college applications were submitted, and I'd finally started sleeping through the night again. But life has a way of pulling the rug out just when you think you're steady on your feet. I noticed it first during our morning coffee routine. Grandpa's hands trembled as he reached for his mug, spilling drops across the counter. Just tired, he said, wiping up the mess. But I caught him squinting at his morning paper, the words seeming to swim before his eyes. The next day, he forgot to pick me up from school. I found him in his study, staring blankly at his desk calendar. Grandpa? He looked up, confused. Avery? What time is it? 4:30. Oh God, I was supposed to. He pressed his fingers to his temples. I've been getting these headaches. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Mom stood on the porch, still in her hospital scrubs. Everything okay? She asked, peering past me. The school called when no one picked Avery up. We're fine, I said quickly. Grandpa just lost track of time. She frowned. Dad? Are you feeling all right? Just a headache, he mumbled, but his voice was slurred at the edges. Mom switched to doctor mode instantly, checking his pupils, asking questions. I stood frozen, watching her examine him with professional detachment. You need to see a neurologist, she said finally. Today. I have an appointment next week. No, Dad. Today. The hospital waiting room felt like a time warp. Mom made calls while I sat with Grandpa, watching him drift in and out of focus. Did you tell Ethan where you are? I asked Mom when she returned with coffee. He's handling it. Her voice was clipped. He wanted to come, but... But what? She hesitated. He thought it might be better if we discussed living arrangements first. My stomach clenched. Living arrangements? Avery, if your grandfather needs care. He has care. He has me. You're 17. You can't. Watch me. Grandpa stirred. Stop fighting, he mumbled. Please. The doctor's words blurred together, mass. Tests. Treatment options. I caught fragments through the roaring in my ears, advanced stage, and aggressive growth, and a quality of life decisions. Mom gripped Grandpa's hand while he nodded calmly, like they were discussing the weather instead of his brain tumor. Later that night, I found a text from Chloe. Dad's already talking about selling the house. Says it's for the best. I'm sorry. I deleted it without responding. We should discuss options, Mom said over dinner, hospital cafeteria sandwiches that tasted like cardboard. I'm not leaving him, I said. Of course not. But maybe. Maybe it's time to come home. All of us. We could convert the den into a sick room? So Ethan can watch Grandpa die while he plans to sell his house? That's not fair. None of this is fair. My voice cracked. A nurse glanced our way, and I lowered it. First Dad, now Grandpa. And you just want to pack everything away like it never existed. I'm trying to help. No, you're trying to control everything. Like always. Grandpa's voice drifted from his hospital bed. Avery, come here. I went to him, taking his weathered hand in mine. Your mother's right about one thing, he said softly. You can't do this alone. I'm not leaving you. No one's leaving anyone. He squeezed my hand. But we need help. Professional help. We can get nurses, I said quickly. Home care. I'll figure it out. With what money? The question hung there, heavy with implications. Dad's trust fund was for college. Grandpa's savings wouldn't cover long-term medical care. I'll defer college, I said. Work instead. No. His voice was stronger now. You're going to college. That's not negotiable. But. Sometimes, he said, protecting someone means knowing when to let go. I looked at Mom, hovering in the doorway, then back at Grandpa. The choice loomed before me, hold on to my anger, or find a way forward together. I need time, I whispered. Time, Grandpa said with a sad smile, is something none of us have enough of. Grandpa Walter died on a Tuesday, just like Dad. Maybe Tuesdays just had it out for my family. The funeral home smelled like artificial flowers and coffee. I sat in the front row, staring at the closed casket, while people filed past with their practiced sympathy. Mom hovered nearby, trying to play both grieving daughter and concerned mother, failing at both. "He left this for you," the lawyer said quietly, handing me an envelope during the reception. "Asked me to deliver it today." I slipped it into my pocket without opening it. I couldn't handle any more last words right now. "Avery." Ethan's voice. He'd been working the room like a politician, shaking hands, accepting condolences. "We should discuss the house." "Not today. The market's hot right now. If we list quickly." I said not today. "Honey," Mom cut in, "we need to be practical. The medical bills are covered," I said. "Grandpa told me." "What do you mean, covered?" I met her eyes. "He had insurance. And savings. And plans." "Plans?" Ethan's voice sharpened. "What plans?" "Ask your lawyer." I stood up. "I need air." Outside, I found Chloe sitting on the steps, picking at her black dress. "I'm sorry," she said. "About everything." "Thanks." "Dad's being weird about the house." "When isn't he weird about money?" She almost smiled. "True." Back inside, I heard raised voices from the funeral home office. Mom and Ethan, arguing with the lawyer. "What do you mean he left everything to Avery?" "The house, the savings, everything except a small provision for Lydia. It's all legally binding. She's 17. With a court-appointed trustee until she's 18. Which is in 3 months." I stepped into the doorway. Mom's face was flushed, Ethan's carefully constructed mask cracking. "You knew about this?" Mom demanded. "Grandpa told me last week. In the hospital, between morphine doses. He wanted to make sure I'd be okay." "You're not okay." Mom exploded. "You're 17. You need your mother. Like you needed yours? Before you let Ethan talk you into selling her jewelry?" She flinched. "That's different." "No, it's not. You keep trying to erase the past, but some of us want to remember it." "Remember it?" Ethan scoffed. "You're living in it. Clinging to a dead man's house won't bring him back. Or your father." The room went silent. "Get out." My voice was ice. "Both of you." "Avery. Get out." They left, Mom crying, Ethan steering her with that possessive hand on her back. Always steering, always controlling. Alone in the office, I finally opened Grandpa's letter. "Dear Avery. By now you know about the house and the money. What you don't know is why. Your father and I planned this together before he died. We saw what was happening to your mother, how grief was changing her, making her vulnerable to people who might take advantage. The house isn't just a building, kiddo. It's your anchor. Your safe harbor. Don't let anyone take that from you. But remember, harbors aren't meant to keep ships forever. They're just safe places to rest before the next journey. Your mother isn't a bad person. She's lost, like you were. Maybe, with time, you can help each other find your way back. All my love. Grandpa." I folded the letter, my vision blurring. Through the window, I watched Mom and Ethan in the parking lot. He was gesturing angrily, she was shaking her head. Then she did something I hadn't seen before, she stepped away from his controlling hand, walking to her car alone. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe, "Dad's talking about contesting the will. Says he has proof Grandpa wasn't competent when he signed it." Of course he was. Even now, Ethan was plotting, scheming, trying to take what wasn't his. I touched the letter in my pocket. Safe harbor, Grandpa had said. But sometimes, to keep a harbor safe, you have to weather one last storm. Looking at the lawyer's business card, I made a decision. It was time to show Ethan exactly what kind of storm he'd sailed into. The locksmith finished his work just as Ethan's BMW pulled into the driveway. Perfect timing. "This is private property," I called from the porch. "You're not welcome here." Ethan stepped out, straightening his tie. Always dressed for business, even when trying to steal someone's home. "Actually, I have documentation suggesting otherwise." He pulled out a folder. Even from here, I could see my grandfather's signature, shaky, barely legible, dated during his final hospital stay. "Amazing what people will sign when they're on morphine," I said. "Your grandfather was perfectly lucid." Ethan smiled that toothpaste commercial smile. "The witnesses will testify to that." "What witnesses?" "The nurses you bribed?" His smile flickered. "You should be careful making accusations like that." "Like the accusations you made about Grandpa's mental state? The ones you threatened to take to court?" Movement caught my eye. Mom's car pulling up, Chloe in the passenger seat. "They weren't supposed to be here." "I brought reinforcements," Ethan said smugly. "Your mother agrees the house should be sold. For everyone's benefit." Mom stepped out, looking uncertain. "Avery, please. We need to talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" I pulled out my phone. Like how Ethan rationally discussed selling Grandpa's house while he was still alive. I pressed play on the recording from that day in Grandpa's study. Ethan's voice filled the air. "The old man's dying anyway. Once he's gone, we'll contest whatever will he's got. No judge will side with a teenager over her mother." Mom's face went white. Chloe stepped away from her father, moving closer to the porch where I stood. "You recorded me?" Ethan's mask cracked. "That's illegal." "In this state?" "Only if both parties don't know they're being recorded." "Grandpa knew. He wanted evidence of who you really are." "Dad?" Chloe's voice was small. "What's he talking about?" "About contesting the will before." "Stay out of this, princess." "Don't call me that." She climbed the porch steps, standing beside me. "Not after what you did to Mom's inheritance when she died." Ethan's face darkened. "Chloe." "Tell them," she said. "Tell them what you did to Mom's money. The money that was supposed to be for my college." Mom turned to Ethan. "What is she talking about?" "Nothing." "She's confused." "I saw the papers," Chloe continued. "The ones you hide in your desk. Mom left me a trust fund, just like Avery's dad did for her. But you spent it all on your investments." The silence that followed was deafening. "Is this true?" Mom asked. "Lydia, don't let them manipulate you. Answer the question." His mask finally shattered. "Everything I did for us. For our future." "No," Mom said quietly. "You did it for yourself. Just like you're doing now." She walked up to the porch, past Ethan's reaching hand. For the first time in months, she really looked at me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've been so blind." "We're not done here," Ethan called. "I'll take this to court." "With what evidence?" I held up my phone. "The recording of you plotting to steal from a dying man? Or maybe Chloe's trust fund papers?" "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." He looked between us and me, Mom, Chloe, seeing his carefully constructed plan crumbling. Without a word, he got back in his BMW and drove away. Mom touched my arm hesitantly. "Can we talk? Really talk?" I looked at the new locks on Grandpa's door, my door now. Safe harbor, he'd called it. But harbors weren't meant to keep ships forever. "Coffee?" I offered. "I think there's some of Grandpa's blend left." Mom smiled through her tears. "I'd like that." Chloe hung back. "I should go." "Stay," I said. "We have plenty of rooms here. If you want one." As we went inside, I felt the weight of Dad's letter in my pocket, Grandpa's words echoing, sometimes protecting someone means knowing when to let go. But maybe it also means knowing when to let them back in. 1 year later, I stood in Grandpa's study, my study now, holding my college acceptance letter. Dad's alma mater. Full scholarship. Everything they'd wanted for me. The house had changed over the past year, but not in the ways Ethan had planned. Instead of being sold off, it had become something new, a safe harbor for more than just me. Chloe lived in what used to be Grandpa's guest room, her dance trophies mixing with his old books. After the custody battle, she'd chosen to stay here with us. Turned out she had her own trust fund lawyer, one who helped her recover what Ethan had taken. Is that it? Mom asked from the doorway. She came over 3 times a week now, slowly rebuilding what we'd lost. The letter from Stanford? I nodded, running my fingers over the embossed letterhead. Your father would be so proud, she said softly. Both of them would. The doorbell rang. Probably the realtor, not for this house, but for Mom's. She was finally selling it, moving into the small cottage down the street. Close enough to visit, far enough to give us space. I'll get it, Chloe called from downstairs. I placed the acceptance letter on the desk, next to the last photo taken of Dad, Grandpa, and me together. They were both smiling, real smiles, not the kind Ethan had perfected. Have you heard from him? I asked Mom. She shook her head. Not since the divorce. Last I heard, he was in Seattle, trying to convince some tech startup to hire him. Good riddance, Chloe said, returning with a package. This came for you, Avery. The return address made my heart skip, Dad's old law firm. Inside was a letter, dated just weeks before he died. Dear Avery. If you're reading this, it means you're about to start college. Your grandfather promised to hold this letter until then. By now you've probably faced challenges I couldn't protect you from. You've probably had to make hard choices about forgiveness, justice, and what family really means. Remember what I told you about harbors? They're not just safe places to rest, they're where journeys begin. Your journey is just starting, kiddo. The house is yours now, to do with as you choose. But I hope you'll consider what you've built there, not just a shelter from storms, but a place where broken things can heal. I'm proud of you, not just for what you've achieved, but for who you've become. Love. Dad. I looked around the study, seeing it through new eyes. The desk where Chloe did her homework. The chair where Mom sat during our weekly dinners. The walls that had witnessed both endings and beginnings. You okay? Mom asked.
Yeah,
I said, surprised to find it was true. Just thinking about harbors. What about them? How they're not just about protecting things. They're about launching them too. Chloe picked up my acceptance letter. Stanford's pretty far away. It is, I agreed. But distance doesn't matter much when you know where home is. Mom touched the photo on the desk. Your father used to say that love isn't about holding on, it's about giving people room to sail and a safe place to return. Speaking of sailing, Chloe said, my dance recital's next week. If you guys want to come. Wouldn't miss it, I said. Later that night, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of hope. Mom's car was parked in the driveway, not in Dad's old spot, but in her own new space. Chloe's music drifted down from upstairs, no longer an intrusion but part of the house's rhythm. I thought about revenge, about protection, about all the ways we try to hold on to what we love. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what hurt you, it's about building something stronger from the wreckage. Dad and Grandpa had given me a harbor. But what I'd built here was something even better, a home where broken ships could become whole again. I pulled out my phone and started typing, Dear Stanford Admissions. My journey was just beginning, but for the first time since that Tuesday afternoon that changed everything, I knew exactly where I was headed.
I stared at my phone, reading the voicemail transcript for the 5th time. My mother's words glowed on the screen, each one making my stomach twist a little tighter. Ember, please. I know it's been years, but I need your help. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. My name is Ember, and the last time I heard my mother's voice, I was 16. She was walking out our front door with a Louis Vuitton suitcase and promises of figuring things out. 8 years later, here she was. Her voice crackling through my phone speaker, acting like she had any right to ask me for anything. I was sitting in my father's office when the message came through. The familiar smell of leather and coffee surrounded me as I watched him shuffle through papers on his desk. He looked tired, more tired than usual. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows highlighted the gray in his hair that seemed to have multiplied overnight. "Dad," I said, my phone still clutched in my hand. "Mom just left me a voicemail." He stopped moving, his hand frozen over a stack of contracts. "Corinne." The way he said her name, like it was both a prayer and a curse, made my chest ache. "She says she needs help." I played the message on speaker, watching his face as my mother's voice filled the room. "Please, Ember. I know I don't deserve it, but things aren't what they seem. I'm in trouble, and you're the only one I can trust." Dad's expression hardened. "Delete it," he said firmly. "Whatever game she's playing, you don't want any part of it." I should have listened to him. Should have deleted the message and gone back to our normal Tuesday afternoon routine of reviewing business reports and sharing takeout from the Thai place down the street. But something in her voice nagged at me, a tremor of fear I'd never heard before. "What if she really is in trouble?" I asked. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sweetheart, your mother's greatest talent is making her problems everyone else's emergency. Trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way." He started coughing then, deep, rattling coughs that seemed to come from his very core. I rushed to get him water, but he waved me off. When the fit passed, he looked even more exhausted than before. "Dad, are you okay? That cough's getting worse." "Actually," he said, straightening in his chair, "there's something I need to tell you." He gestured to the seat across from his desk. "Sit down, kiddo." My heart dropped. I knew that tone. It was the same one he'd used when he told me my childhood dog had died, when my first boyfriend cheated on me, when Mom left. "I've been seeing some specialists," he began, his voice steady despite the weight I could hear behind his words. "The tests came back last week. It's stage 4 lung cancer. They're giving me 6 months, maybe a year with treatment." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to anchor myself to something solid as everything else seemed to float away. "No," I whispered. "There has to be something they can do." "We'll fight it," he assured me, reaching across the desk to squeeze my hand. "But I need you to be prepared. The business, everything I've built, it's all going to be yours." My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. "Ember, please call me back. It's about your father." I looked up at Dad, who was watching me with concern. What does she know? I wondered aloud. "Nothing good," he replied grimly. "Whatever she wants, remember who she is. Remember what she did to us." But as I sat there, torn between my father's warning and my mother's plea, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was unfolding. Something that would force me to choose between the parent who stayed and the one who left, between trust and suspicion. Between the comfortable life I knew and the uncomfortable truths I might discover. I saved the voicemail, knowing that whatever I decided to do next would change everything. The cafe where I agreed to meet my mother was exactly her style, overpriced lattes and pretentious artwork on exposed brick walls. I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table near the exit. Old habits die hard. When she walked in, it felt like being punched in the chest. 8 years had barely touched her, same perfectly styled blonde hair, same designer clothes. Same confident stride that used to make me feel so proud when I was little. Now it just made me angry. "Ember, sweetheart." She moved to hug me, but I stayed seated. Her arms dropped awkwardly to her sides. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I said, watching her settle into the chair across from me. "You said this was about Dad?" She flinched at his name, her manicured fingers fidgeting with her wedding ring. Not the one Dad gave her, but the upgrade from Victor. Her new husband. "Yes, but first, how are you?" "You look wonderful. Are you still working with your father?" "Cut the small talk, Mom. What do you want?" A barista approached, and Mom ordered some complicated drink I couldn't pronounce. I asked for black coffee, making her wince. "Some things never change." "Your father's sick, isn't he?" she asked once we were alone again. Terminal cancer? My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. How did you? I have my sources. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Ember, there's something you need to know about the business. Your father. He's not who you think he is. A memory flashed through my mind. Dad teaching me to ride a bike, running alongside until I found my balance. Dad staying up all night helping me with science fair projects. Dad holding me while I cried after she left. Don't, I warned. Don't you dare try to poison this too. I'm trying to protect you, she insisted. There are things happening, deals being made. When your father dies, if you know so much, why didn't you reach out to him? Why come to me? Her perfect composure cracked, just for a second. Because he wouldn't listen. But you're smart, Ember. You always were. I need you to look into something for me. There are documents. Documents. I laughed, but it came out harsh. Let me guess, you need money. That's what this is really about, isn't it? It's not that simple. She glanced around nervously. Victor's company is struggling. If certain information came to light, there it is. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You haven't changed at all. Still using people, still only caring about yourself. Ember, please. She grabbed my wrist. Your brother Jasper. Don't. I yanked my arm away. Don't you dare use him to manipulate me. He's 15, the same age I was when you walked out on us. Does he know you're here? Her silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. I pulled some cash from my wallet and dropped it on the table. Stay away from me, Mom. And stay away from Dad's business. As I turned to leave, she called out, I know about Milo Thompson's offshore accounts. I froze. Milo was Dad's business partner, practically my uncle. He'd been there for every birthday, every graduation, every milestone Mom had missed. What are you talking about? She smiled, that calculating smile I'd seen so many times before. Have dinner with me tomorrow night. I'll explain everything. I should have walked away. Should have told her to go to hell. Instead, I heard myself say, text me the details. Outside, I leaned against the building, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed, a message from Dad. Everything okay, kiddo? I stared at the screen, thinking about the tired look in his eyes, about Milo's offshore accounts, about all the questions I suddenly had. Mom was lying. She had to be. But what if she wasn't? I typed back, all good. Just running some errands. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I needed to know the truth. Even if it meant playing my mother's game, even if it meant risking everything I thought I knew about my family. Because sometimes the worst betrayals come from the people we trust the most. I spent 3 days digging through company records, searching for anything connected to Milo's supposed offshore accounts. The office felt different now. Every shadow held secrets. Every casual conversation could hide a lie. When Milo stopped by my desk that morning, my hands instinctively covered the financial reports I'd been reviewing. Working hard or hardly working? He asked, the same joke he'd made since I was a kid. Just catching up on some paperwork, I said, forcing a smile. How's Dad doing today? Resting. The chemo's hitting him pretty hard. Milo's face softened with genuine concern. You should go see him, Ember. He's asking for you. Guilt twisted in my stomach. I'd been avoiding Dad, afraid my face would betray what I was investigating. I will. Just need to finish something first. After Milo left, my phone buzzed. Another text from Mom. Found what I mentioned yet? Time's running out. I was about to ignore it when an email notification popped up from Victor, my stepfather. My heart stopped when I saw the subject line, urgent, financial discrepancies. The email was brief. Ember, need to discuss some concerning transactions I've discovered. Can we meet privately? Don't mention this to anyone, especially your mother. My hands shook as I drove to Victor's office downtown. The pieces weren't fitting together. Mom's warnings about Milo, Victor's mysterious email, Dad's illness. Something was very wrong. Victor's secretary led me straight in. He looked up from his computer, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. Thank you for coming, Ember. Please close the door. What's going on? I asked, remaining standing. What transactions? He turned his monitor toward me. These wire transfers, all to an account in the Cayman Islands. They're linked to your father's company, but the paperwork doesn't add up. I leaned closer, scanning the numbers. Millions of dollars transferred over the past year. That's impossible. Dad would never. It gets worse, Victor interrupted. Your mother came to me last week, asking for a substantial loan. When I refused, she threatened to expose these transactions to the SEC. The room spun slightly. She's blackmailing you? I think she's desperate, Victor said quietly. But I'm more concerned about where this money is actually going. Have you noticed anything unusual at the company? Before I could answer, my phone rang Milo's number. When I answered, his voice was tight with panic. Ember, get to the hospital. No, it's your father. I ran out without explaining to Victor, my mind racing. At the hospital, I found Milo pacing outside Dad's room. He collapsed during his treatment, he explained. They're stabilizing him, but... Through the window, I watched the medical team working around Dad's bed. He looked so small, so fragile. Nothing like the strong man who'd raised me alone. Milo, I said, my voice barely steady. I need to ask you something. About the offshore accounts. He went very still. Who told you about those? Does it matter? Are they real? Ember. He glanced at Dad's room, then pulled me further down the hallway. Everything I've done has been to protect your father and you. But your mother, she's going to destroy everything we've built. What are you talking about? What did you do? Before he could answer, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Well, isn't this cozy? Mom stood there, designer handbag clutched like a shield. I tried to warn you, didn't I? About the kind of men you trusted. Get out, I snapped. You don't belong here. Actually, she smiled, pulling papers from her bag, I belong exactly here. These documents prove that Milo has been embezzling money for years. Money that should have gone to your father's medical care. Milo stepped forward. Corinne, don't. Unless, she continued, my daughter helps me with a small financial matter. Then perhaps these papers never reach the authorities. I looked between them. Milo's guilty face. Mom's triumphant smile. Dad lying unconscious just yards away. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I was just a pawn in their game, and it was time to stop playing by their rules. You want to see some real documents? I pulled out my phone, bringing up Victor's email. Let's talk about what I found. Dad was awake when I entered his hospital room the next morning, looking smaller against the white sheets. The documents I'd found were burning a hole in my bag, but one look at his face made me hesitate. You look terrible, he said, managing a weak smile. Look who's talking. I settled into the chair beside his bed, watching the steady drip of his four. The doctors say you pushed yourself too hard yesterday. Had to make sure everything was in order at the office. He reached for the water glass, his hands shaking. I helped him take a sip, pretending not to notice how much weight he'd lost. About the office, I started, but he cut me off. Milo told me you've been asking questions. His voice was quiet but firm. About the accounts. The air felt suddenly thick. Did he tell you everything? Enough. Dad closed his eyes briefly. The money. It wasn't what you think. We were protecting the company. Protecting you. By committing fraud? The words came out sharper than I intended. Mom's threatening to expose everything unless I help her blackmail Victor. Did you know that? His laugh turned into a cough. Your mother always did have perfect timing. This isn't funny, Dad. The CC, the police, they could take everything you built. Everything I built? He looked at me directly now. Ember, the company was never meant to be my legacy. You are. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Jasper. Need to talk. Mom's acting weird. Can you meet? I have to go, I said, standing. But this conversation isn't over. Wait. Dad grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. There's a safe in my home office. Behind the Degas print. The combination is your birthday. He released me, sinking back into the pillows. Whatever you find, remember I love you. I found Jasper at our usual spot, the old playground where I used to take him when he was little. At 15, he looked too big for the swings now. Mom's been crying, he said without preamble. I heard her on the phone talking about losing everything. And Victor, he's barely home anymore. It's complicated, Jazz. I'm not a kid anymore. His voice cracked slightly. I know something's wrong. Jess, is Mom in trouble? I thought about the documents in my bag, about Dad's safe, about all the lies tangling around us. We all are. Back at Dad's house, my hands trembled as I entered my birthday into the safe. Inside was a single USB drive and a letter addressed to me. The paper felt heavy, expensive, Mom's preferred stationery. The date showed it was written 8 years ago, the day she left. My phone rang Victor's number. When I answered, his voice was tense. "Where are you?" "Dad's house." "Why?" "Stay there. Your mother's on her way to the hospital. She's going to tell Owen everything unless we meet her demands." "What demands?" $2 million and control of the company's Asian subsidiaries. He paused. "She says she has proof that the offshore accounts were used to hide money from her during your parents' divorce." "If that's true." I looked at the unopened letter in my hand. "I'll handle Mom. Just keep Jasper away from this." "Ember," Victor said softly, "whatever happens, I want you to know I never knew what she was planning." "I'm sorry." After hanging up, I finally opened the letter. Mom's elegant handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Ember, by now you've discovered what your father and Milo did. The money they hid, the lies they told. I'm not leaving because I don't love you. I'm leaving because I can't fight them alone. Someday you'll understand that sometimes we have to destroy everything to build something better. All my love, Mom." The paper crumpled in my fist as 8 years of grief turned to rage. They'd all lied, Mom, Dad, Milo, each claiming to protect me while using me as a pawn in their game. Well, I was done being a pawn. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, my finger hovering over the enter key. Whatever truth it contained would change everything. But maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes we have to destroy everything to build something better. I pressed enter. The USB drive contained years of financial records. But one transaction caught my eye, a series of payments to a shell company called Phoenix Holdings starting the day Mom left. I was still staring at the screen when my phone lit up with Jasper's text. "Mom's taking me to the airport. Says we're going on a trip." My blood ran cold. I called him immediately. "Where are you?" I demanded when he answered. "Terminal B. Mom's acting weird, Ember. She keeps checking her phone and..." "Put her on." A shuffle, then Mom's voice, smooth as silk. "Ember, darling. Bad timing, we're about to board." Taking Jasper on an impromptu vacation with Victor's money? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Or should I ask Phoenix Holdings about their investment strategy? The line went quiet for a moment. "How did you get away from my brother?" "Now, he's my son. He's a kid you're trying to use as leverage." I was already grabbing my keys, running to my car. "Like you used me 8 years ago." "I'm protecting him," she hissed. "Victor's company is collapsing. Once the SEC investigation starts." "What investigation?" Another pause. "Check your email." I pulled up my phone's email app at a red light. There it was, a forwarded message from the Securities and Exchange Commission, requesting documents related to Phoenix Holdings and offshore transfers. "You reported Victor's company," I realized. "Your own husband, Victor, your father, Milo. They're all going down. But I can protect you and Jasper. We just need to leave for a while." I pressed harder on the accelerator. "Put Jasper back on." Instead, I heard commotion in the background. A security announcement. Mom's muffled voice saying something about boarding passes. "Mom." Jasper's voice came through, shaky. "Ember, something's wrong." "She's crying." I could see the airport ahead. "Jazz, listen carefully. Mom's trying to run." "Whatever she's told you." "But Dad's in trouble, right? She said we have to leave before." "She's lying." The words exploded out of me. "She's been lying to all of us. The money, the threats, everything. It's all because she got caught stealing from Victor's company years ago. She's trying to escape before." The call dropped. I screeched into the terminal parking, barely remembering to lock the car. Running through the airport, I dialed Victor. "She's trying to leave with Jasper," I gasped. "Terminal B. Call security." "Already done," he replied grimly. "Ember, there's something else. Your father's asking for you. The doctors say." I stopped running. "No, not yet. He can't. You need to choose. Now." The airport speakers crackled. Final boarding call for Flight 2476 to Grand Cayman. My phone buzzed, a text from Jasper. "Help." Another from Dad's nurse. Please come quickly. And finally from Mom, I'm sorry, baby. Sometimes running is the only way to survive. I stood frozen in the terminal, tears burning my eyes. Dad was dying. Mom was escaping. Jasper was trapped in the middle. And I had to choose. The truth hit me then. This wasn't about justice anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about breaking a cycle of lies and manipulation that had poisoned our family for generations. I took a deep breath and made my choice. Victor, I said into the phone, I need you to do something for me. Pull up every record you have on Phoenix Holdings. Every transaction, every signature, every phone call. Then send it all to the SEC. That will destroy your mother. I know. I watched as airport security moved toward Gate B12. But sometimes we have to destroy everything to build something better. I ended the call and started running again, but not toward the gate. Toward the exit. Toward the hospital. Toward the only parent who had never made me choose between love and lies. Behind me, I heard Mom's voice calling my name, desperate and breaking. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. I made it to Dad's hospital room just in time to hold his hand. His last words weren't profound or dramatic, just a quiet "I love you," before the monitors started screaming. I stood there numb, as the medical team rushed in, their urgent voices fading to white noise. Hours later, I sat in his empty room, staring at my phone. 17 missed calls from Victor. One text from Jasper. They arrested Mom at the airport. Where are you? A knock at the door made me look up. Milo stood there, his face drawn. Ember, I'm so sorry. About Owen, about everything. Did you know? My voice sounded strange, hollow. About Phoenix Holdings? He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Your father was trying to protect you. The money. It was meant to be your inheritance, hidden where Corinne couldn't touch it. Stop lying. I stood up, my legs shaky. I saw the records. The payment started the day Mom left. She was blackmailing you both, wasn't she? Milo's silence was answer enough. Dad died thinking I chose him, I whispered. But he was just as bad as she was. It's more complicated than that. Milo reached for my arm, but I jerked away. Owen wanted to tell you everything, but then the cancer. Miss Callahan? A detective stood in the doorway, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. We need to ask you some questions about Phoenix Holdings. My laugh sounded borderline hysterical. Join the club. We have evidence suggesting you were involved in the transactions. She pulled out a document. Your signature appears on several wire transfers. That's impossible. But even as I said it, I remembered the stack of papers Dad had me sign last month. Administrative stuff, he'd said. For the business. The detective's expression remained neutral. We'll need you to come with us. She doesn't go anywhere without a lawyer, Milo interrupted. Mr. Thompson, you're also under investigation. I suggest you both. My phone buzzed. Victor calling again. This time I answered. They're freezing the company's assets, he said without preamble. All of them, including your father's estate. The room started spinning. But the medical bills, the funeral costs. I'll help however I can, but... He paused. Corinne's talking to the prosecutors. She's offering evidence against everyone, me, Milo, Owen's estate. She's trying to cut a deal. Of course she was. Even from a jail cell, Mom was still playing her games. Miss Callahan, the detective was getting impatient. Are you coming voluntarily, or do we need to make this official? I looked around the hospital room where Dad had died less than 3 hours ago. His coffee cup still sat on the bedside table half full. A crossword puzzle lay unfinished beside it. All these little pieces of him, already turning into evidence in someone else's investigation. I need a minute, I managed. Please. Once they stepped outside, I sank into the chair, my head in my hands. Dad was gone. Mom was in custody. The company was frozen. And I might be headed to jail for signatures I didn't even know I was making. My phone buzzed one more time, Jasper. They won't let me see Mom. I'm scared, That's when I broke. Tears came in huge, gasping sobs that felt like they might tear me apart. Everything Dad and I had built, everything we'd protected, was crumbling. And the worst part? I couldn't even grieve him properly because his lies were still unraveling. Through my tears, I noticed something poking out from Dad's crossword puzzle, a folded piece of paper with my name on it. With trembling fingers, I opened it. My dearest Ember, if you're reading this, I'm gone and the truth is out. But there's one more thing you don't know. Check the safe at home one more time. The second combination, your mother's birthday. I'm sorry for the lies, but everything I did for love. Dad. The detective knocked again. Miss Callahan? Time to go. I wiped my eyes and stood up, Dad's note burning in my pocket. Whatever was in that second safe, it was my last chance to understand why everyone I loved had chosen lies over truth. But first, I had to face the consequences of their choices. And mine. After 3 days of questioning, the police finally let me go home. The first thing I did was head to Dad's office, my hands shaking as I input Mom's birthday into the safe. Inside, I found a single envelope containing photos, dozens of them, showing Mom meeting with known criminals years ago, long before she left us. My phone rang. Milo. Don't trust the evidence, he said without preamble. Your mother's deal with the prosecutors. It's based on forged documents. How do you know? Because I helped her create them. His voice cracked. 8 years ago, when she threatened to expose Owen's dealings with Phoenix Holdings. But the real story, it's worse than you think. I spread the photos across Dad's desk. The real story is in front of me. Mom was working with criminals before she ever left. Dad was protecting me from her, wasn't he? No, Ember. He was protecting her. From them. From himself. From everything he did to keep her safe until she couldn't take it anymore. The office door opened. Victor stood there, looking exhausted. They're moving Corinne to federal custody tomorrow. If you want answers, now's your chance. At the detention center, Mom sat across from me in her orange jumpsuit, her perfect facade finally cracking. You found the photos. Start talking. She touched the glass between us. I was young, stupid, working as a cocktail waitress when I met your father. He was different then, ambitious, dangerous. He used me to get close to certain people, gather information. When I tried to leave, he threatened to expose my involvement. You're lying. Ask Milo. Ask him about the night Owen burned down his competitor's warehouse. Ask him where the Phoenix Holdings money really came from. My phone buzzed. Milo again. Don't believe anything she says. I'm on my way. He's coming here, isn't he? Mom smiled sadly. Perfect. Maybe now you'll finally learn the truth about the man who raised you. The detention center door burst open. Milo rushed in, out of breath. Ember, wait. Tell her, Mom challenged. Tell her about the fire. About the man who died. Milo's face went ash white. Owen was protecting you. By becoming a murderer? Mom's voice rose. By forcing me to help cover it up? Stop it. I slammed my hand against the glass. Both of you. Just stop. But they couldn't stop. Years of secrets poured out. Dad's illegal dealings, Mom's forced compliance, Milo's role as the faithful fixer. Each revelation felt like another knife in my chest. I left to protect you, Mom whispered. But Owen, he couldn't let go. Phoenix Holdings wasn't about hiding money from me. It was about keeping me quiet. The payments, the threats. He knew I'd never risk losing you completely. My phone lit up with a text from Victor. As you see, found something. Get to the office now. I stood up, my legs unsteady. You're both going to jail. You know that, right? Maybe, Mom said quietly. But ask yourself, why did Owen make you sign those documents last month? Why did he make sure your name was on everything? Horror dawned slowly. He knew he was dying. And he knew I'd talk, she finished. He tied you to everything, made you complicit. His final insurance policy. Milo reached for me. Ember, let me explain. I backed away from both of them. Dad didn't protect me. He used me. Just like you did, Mom. Just like everyone. Not everyone, Mom said. Check Victor's personal email. Password is Jasper's birthday. See who really tried to keep you clean in all this. I left them there, two broken people trapped in a web of their own making. In the parking lot, I sat in my car staring at my phone, wondering which truth would hurt less, the one I'd always believed, or the one I was about to discover. Sometimes the real revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about finally seeing them for who they really are. I typed in Jasper's birthday and held my breath. 1 year later, I stood in front of Dad's grave, autumn leaves crunching under my feet. The headstone was simple, just his name and dates, no mention of the legacy he left behind, both good and bad. Victor's emails had revealed everything. Years of correspondence showing how he'd worked secretly to protect me from both my parents' schemes, gathering evidence while trying to shield me from the worst of their manipulations. In the end, his testimony had helped reduce my involvement to unwitting participation, saving me from prosecution. "Ready?" Jasper asked, appearing beside me. At 16, he was already taller than me, but his eyes still held that same trust they always had. Almost. I placed a small stone on Dad's headstone, a tradition he'd taught me, though I never knew if he'd made it up or if it meant something more. The company had survived, barely. After the dust settled, I'd used what remained to start something new, a foundation helping kids affected by white-collar crime. It felt right, turning all that darkness into something meaningful. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom's prison email account. She had 3 years left on her sentence, reduced for cooperation. I hadn't opened any of her messages in months, but this subject line caught my eye. "You were right." Inside was a single paragraph. "I spent my life running from the truth, convincing myself that lies were protection. But you chose differently. You chose to face everything head-on, to build instead of destroy. I'm proud of you, even if I don't deserve to be." "Mom still writing?" Jasper asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah." I slipped the phone back in my pocket. "How's therapy going?" "Better. Doctor says it's good I'm talking about everything now. About Mom, about all of it." We walked back to the car together, where Victor waited. He'd become the father figure I never knew I needed. Steady, honest, present. The kind of parent who showed love through actions instead of words. Milo called, he said as we got in. The appeals court denied his request. I nodded, feeling nothing but a dull ache where the anger used to burn. Milo had tried to claim Dad had forced him into everything, but the evidence told a different story. Some betrayals can't be blamed on anyone else. Back at my new office, I found an unexpected visitor, the detective who'd first questioned me at the hospital. "Miss Callahan," she said, rising from the reception area. "I thought you'd want to know we found more of Phoenix Holdings victims. Families who lost everything. Send me their information," I replied. "The foundation can help." She hesitated. "There's something else. Your father." We found evidence suggesting he tried to make things right at the end. Anonymous donations. Debt forgiveness. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it complicates things, I finished. Everything does, eventually. After she left, I sat at my desk, looking at the photos on my wall. Not the perfect family portraits Mom used to insist on, but real moments. Jasper at his school play. Victor teaching me to golf badly. Even one of Mom from before everything fell apart, laughing at something off camera. And there, in the center, the last photo taken of Dad and me together, both of us smiling despite the hospital setting. We looked happy, even knowing what was coming, even carrying all those secrets. My computer pinged, another donation alert. Someone had given a significant amount to the foundation, anonymously. The timing, the amount. It could only be Mom, using whatever resources she still had hidden away. I thought about deleting it, sending it back. But then I remembered what Dad had written in his final note. Everything I did for love. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. But I could choose what to do with that love now. The real kind, the complicated kind, the kind that survives even when everything else burns down. I accepted the donation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or proving points. Sometimes it's about building something new from the ashes of what was lost, and letting that be enough. I picked up my phone and, for the first time in months, opened the chat with Mom. "Thank you," I typed and hit send. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. But it was a start.
"Who said you could sit? I'm sorry. Everyone, such a clueless and embarrassing daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law, who had just tripped me by kicking my leg, was now acting all sweet and smiley to the relatives around her. People nearby offered their hands to help me up, but my mother-in-law stopped them. I gritted my teeth, holding on to my aching left leg. It's still slightly swollen, but that's the spot I fractured just a month ago. My mother-in-law was flaunting around the relatives, acting like she could treat me, her daughter-in-law, like a mere servant. But then someone appeared, and just like that, my mother-in-law's reputation crumbled. My name is Jennifer. I'm 24 this year, and I live with my husband. We both work full-time. I met my husband at a matchmaking event organized by a friend. Back then, I thought the idea of getting married was silly, and I was too shy to even consider dating someone. Plus, I was always so focused on my studies that I didn't have many friends. Because of my personality, a few of my close friends worried that I might end up single and with few friends for the rest of my life. So they strongly insisted and brought me to the event. I wasn't looking for a life partner, but by chance I met Ken, who's 2 years older than me. He turned out to be a senior colleague of the friend who had invited me. Apparently, Ken was also one of those who got dragged into attending the event. My friend whispered to me, "If you don't find anyone else you like, just chat with this guy." So, I did just that. It seems Ken, too, felt the same way. I later found out he said he'd be with me only if there weren't any other women he liked. In the end, I did attend an event for singles, but later on, I ended up dating Ken, just as my friend had suggested. According to my friend, Ken and I seemed to have similar vibes, so they thought we might be a good match. And it turned out they were right. While we weren't exactly finishing each other's sentences, there were times I knew what Ken was thinking or trying to say, and it seemed he felt the same way about me. We had a comfortable, friendly relationship despite being a couple and eventually got married quite naturally. Up to this point, everything had been smooth, and I was surprised that someone like me, who isn't really good at socializing, got married. But then hell began. Ken's family home was about as far as taking a high-speed train from my hometown, say, like traveling from New York to Chicago. I moved in with my in-laws as soon as we got married. Now, living with in-laws might conjure up images of nasty mother-in-law drama for some. In my case, I thought Ken's parents might be as laid back as Ken himself. But the moment I stepped into their house, an older woman said to me, "You're Jennifer, what's with that messy hair?" Before I could say anything, another older woman said that to me, leaving me stunned. I realized she was Ken's mom because her crescent-shaped eyes, when she smiled, looked just like his. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope you like this." Trying to hide my unease, I handed over a gift box that was in a paper bag. Without reaching for it, my mother-in-law said, "I'm busy, so get ready and come to the kitchen right away. You can unpack later." And then she just disappeared into a room. My father-in-law, who had been silent the whole time, was the one who took the gift. However, he didn't make eye contact with me and mumbled something under his breath as he walked in a different direction from my mother-in-law. Meanwhile, Ken just went inside without a word of explanation or apology. I felt uneasy about the family dynamics I had glimpsed in that brief moment, but I didn't have time to hesitate as my mother-in-law had told me. I handed my luggage over to Ken and quickly headed for the kitchen. Hearing my footsteps, my mother-in-law turned around and gave me a sharp glare. "Do you not tie your hair back when you cook at home? Do you have some tradition where a husband drinks a tea made from his wife's hair or something?" Seems she purposely described my naturally curly hair as messy earlier. I wasn't expecting to start cooking as soon as I arrived, and it appeared she didn't like that I had my hair half up. "I'm sorry. I'll tie it back and come right back." As I was about to leave the kitchen, she said, "Don't you dare drop even a strand of your uncultured hair, and if you're going to tie it, these hold the best," handing me a pile of rubber bands. I was somewhat prepared to be bullied as the new daughter-in-law, but I hadn't expected such direct animosity. My mother-in-law was a tricky person to deal with. Most would assume mothers bully their daughters-in-law because they feel their precious son has been taken away. But it didn't seem that way with her. That's because she was tough on Ken and my father-in-law as well. Especially towards Ken, she'd often say, "You're so weak-willed that you could only get a good-for-nothing wife like her," or "despite me constantly telling you not to turn out like your dad." She was really mean with her words. Ken and my father-in-law just kept quiet, not retaliating at all. I decided that she must have some sort of condition where mother-in-law can't survive without making snide remarks. I managed to endure that. However, there were times when my mother-in-law was in an especially bad mood, and only my meal wouldn't be served. Ken and my father-in-law saw this, but both pretended not to notice. Ken, in an attempt to appease her, would even join in on her nasty remarks about me. Despite being a grown man, he didn't have the guts to speak up to his mother. He acted as if everything his mom said was right, blaming me for it. It made me sad, and at the same time, I was utterly dumbfounded by his attitude. As for my father-in-law, during these times, he would be as inconspicuous as possible, quickly leaving the room whenever my mother-in-law started harping on me. The reason not only Ken, but also my father-in-law couldn't stand up to her became evident through her harsh words. "You married into our family, so you have no right to talk back to me. Everything you have now is thanks to my father. If you have any complaints, why don't you speak up? You'd be cursed by my father." It didn't seem like the father-in-law was afraid of being cursed, but he seemed to feel inferior because he married into the family. Having seen his father being submissive to his mother since he was young, Ken probably realized that his mother was the strongest in the family, just like his father. He always tried to gauge his mother's mood and would either stay silent or agree with her, no matter what she said. I, already anxious about living in my in-laws' house, was soon faced with a predicament. From the day we started living together, I was made to accompany my mother-in-law on her weekly grocery and household shopping trips. One day, after getting used to carrying bags full in both hands, I went to the usual supermarket that my mother-in-law always frequents. It was a weekend, so the elevator we usually took was crowded, and we couldn't use it right away. Impatient, my mother-in-law quickly grew frustrated that there wasn't a single elevator on the ground floor, exclaiming, "Forget it, it's a waste of time to wait here, let's just use the stairs." Though she always has me fetch even just a single TV remote for her, it was surprising to hear such words from my mother-in-law. If I dared to speak out, I felt like she might just bite my head off, so I silently obeyed, walking diagonally behind my fast-paced mother-in-law. I reached out instinctively when she almost tripped over the hem of her dress. In that split second, I stretched out my hand and supported her back to prevent her from falling. But in doing so, I lost my balance and ended up tumbling down a few steps. Until then, everything had been okay. However, because of what I did, I neglected to watch my own step. I lost my balance and fell. "Hey, what the heck are you doing?" Instead of showing concern, my mother-in-law scolded me. Oddly enough, I was more surprised by her reaction than the pain I felt. I'd only fallen down a few steps, but it seemed like I'd twisted my ankle pretty badly. Noticing the rapidly swelling ankle, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue in annoyance. "Ugh, you're so clumsy. With that ankle, you won't be able to carry the groceries properly. Just wait in the car. It's pointless having you here." I don't want to sound ungrateful, but it's pretty harsh considering I got hurt while trying to help my mother-in-law. But if I mentioned that, she'd probably snap at me even more. So I just quietly went back to the car, reclined the seat, and took a rest. The next day, once the household chores had settled down, I went to the doctor around noon. I thought it was just a sprain, but it turned out I had a hairline fracture, and they gave me crutches for the way home. I texted mother-in-law about it, letting her know I'd gotten medicine and would be a bit late. The lack of a response was par for the course, letting me know mother-in-law didn't care in the slightest. Struggling with crutches I wasn't used to, I got home only to be immediately told by my mother-in-law to change the light bulb in the bathroom. The ceiling is high, so just use the ladder from the backyard and make sure to clean that dirty floor. I was taken aback by her usual uncaring attitude. It wasn't that I wanted her to be concerned for me, but couldn't the light bulb replacement wait for Ken or the father-in-law to get back from work? Having someone with a bad leg climb up a ladder on a slippery floor showed mother-in-law's lack of humanity. And of course, when Ken and father-in-law came home, neither showed any concern. All I got was mother-in-law yelling at me for not doing chores efficiently with my injured foot. From that point, her mistreatment of me intensified. Though she didn't lay a hand on me, I was constantly berated with cruel words, increasing my stress. About a month into this life, while I was weeding the garden, protecting my slowly healing foot, mother-in-law approached me. There's a family dinner next week. Knowing you, you don't have any formal dresses, right? I'll lend you one of mine. But make sure you fix that messy hair of yours for the day. Ever since the marriage, she had made me quit my job. I had no money of my own, yet mother-in-law never stopped taking digs, even about the texture of my hair. Thanks to her, I was always forced to tie my hair up tightly, making me feel like I was aging even more. Ken said that family dinners are held about once every 3 months, and everyone who gathers there holds a high social status. Whether they're highly educated and employed at major companies or entrepreneurs with over 500 employees under them, they're all elites in their respective fields. It seems when I actually went, I noticed that in the parking lot of the reserved restaurant, everyone was standing around in groups, chatting and mingling with those high-status individuals. Even though I was the newbie, many approached me to chat. But my mother-in-law would almost always intervene. This is my daughter-in-law, Jennifer. Sure, she's dressed up nicely now, but on a regular day, if no one says anything, she'd be in sweatpants with unkempt hair. It seems she put in extra effort today knowing she'd meet all of you. Honestly, it's a bit much, isn't it? Despite the awkward smiles from others, my mother-in-law kept bad-mouthing me. Some kind person tried to divert the conversation, but my husband Ken either stayed silent or just nodded along to whatever his mom said. The mother-in-law sweet-talked everyone in a clawing tone and even handed out small gifts to each person. When we finally entered the restaurant, the seating arrangement seemed to be decided by some unspoken rules. I was about to take a seat following Ken, but my mother-in-law, who was talking with someone, darted over immediately. "What do you think you're doing? Sitting down as a daughter-in-law? Stand up." Incredibly, she kicked my injured left foot. Losing my balance, I fell hard to the ground, letting out a soft cry. Writhing in pain, I had just had the cast removed, so there was no protection, and I felt the pain directly. Looking down at me, the mother-in-law quickly said to the others, "I apologize for the scene. My lack of discipline has caused this embarrassing display. She should at least fake it better. Right after her own carelessness got her injured, she only knows how to play for sympathy." Mother-in-law may have been panicking inwardly at my fall. Spewing nonsense rapidly, a few nearby people offered to help me up, but she stopped them all. "It's all right. No need to be kind to a liar. I'll give her a piece of my mind, so don't you worry about it." Mother-in-law grabbed my arm, trying to force me up while swiftly taking her own seat. I was sitting on the cushion, being treated like a mere doll by my mother-in-law, and the glances from the surrounding people made me feel embarrassed and irritated. I took a deep breath, ready to express the feelings I'd been holding back. But suddenly, someone approached from behind, brushed past me, and touched the back of my mother-in-law. "Oh, big mother-in-law." The startled voice of my mother-in-law. Judging by her words, it must be my husband's grandmother. The woman was elegant in a pale-colored dress, but her tight-lipped expression gave off a cold vibe. "I heard you weren't coming today." "Well, I did say I might not be able to make it because I had plans, but I made a reservation just in case I could." "What? Shouldn't I have come?" "No, it's not like you shouldn't have come. I'm delighted." My mother-in-law suddenly looked timid and scared. The big mother-in-law told my father-in-law, "Go ahead and start," and led my mother-in-law to a corner of the room. When I tried to stand up, the big mother-in-law stopped me. "You've got that leg injury, right? It's not good to strain yourself. Just relax and sit next to Ken." Her commanding presence was undeniable, so I just complied. As the big mother-in-law was about to return to her seat, my mother-in-law, standing in the corner, spoke up. Big mother-in-law, what is it?" "You should just stand there. If you have something to say it from there." Without even looking back, the big mother-in-law sharply responded. "Why do I have to stand? I came because I wanted to dine with you." Peeks from other relatives made my mother-in-law's face turn even redder. What a ridiculous thing to say. Did you really think you, being just the daughter-in-law, can sit? It's about what you said to Jennifer earlier, isn't it? Don't you think you should set an example? Faced with the big mother-in-law's firm response, my mother-in-law's face turned even brighter red. Soft chuckles could be heard from somewhere. You used to be such a sweet girl when I first met you. When did you become so mean? If I knew you were like this, I wouldn't have let my son marry into your family. Well, my son did run away from home because he didn't like me, so I can't say much. My father-in-law seated in front of me shifted uncomfortably. Turns out the silly reason my father-in-law married into the family wasn't because of a lack of heirs or any special reason, but seemingly to escape his strict mother. And the big mother-in-law just wouldn't stop talking. Everyone had stopped eating and was listening intently. I was shocked when he ran away from home, only to come back casually with a wife and son. You'd think they've done a remarkable job raising their child, but here they are, both of them, pretending not to notice their daughter-in-law being mistreated right in front of them.
From the daughter-in-law's perspective, she must feel she's married into quite the family, huh? Why don't you two show everyone those dumbfounded faces of yours? Big mother-in-law pointed at father-in-law and Ken, who were seated, making them stand next to my mother-in-law. These folks are a disgrace, being rude to relatives who've come from outside. Remember them well. I felt she might be overdoing it, but seeing the three of them heads down made me feel better. All eyes were on them when mother-in-law spoke up again. Big mother-in-law, I've been trying to educate this failure of a daughter-in-law. She barely does her chores, using her foot injury as an excuse, and even puts on a show of pain in public. My husband and son listen to me, but the daughter-in-law's defiance disrupts the household order. While accusing others of putting on a show, mother-in-law pretended to wipe tears with her sleeve, leaving me speechless. Big mother-in-law, who had been silent, sighed deeply and said, "Even if Jennifer were a worthless daughter-in-law, aren't you just as bad for kicking her in front of not only relatives but also guests? You oppress your husband and son and use violence against a daughter-in-law just because she doesn't obey. You're like a frog in a well, thinking it knows everything." Mother-in-law finally fell silent at big mother-in-law's stern, yet not overly emotional voice. The trio, including mother-in-law, stood in the corner for a good hour. In the end, big mother-in-law let them eat because it'd be a waste of food to leave it. After the meal, I stopped big mother-in-law to express my deepest gratitude. While she still had a stern look, she advised, "Don't hesitate to cut off anyone who treats you poorly." Yet her gaze seemed gentler than before. When I got home, my in-laws and Ken were already waiting at the front door. "I bet you haven't been able to clean the yard since you've been out all day. Please take care of weeding, trimming the bushes, watering the flowers, and sweeping the porch. Now, after that, we'd like a massage, so hurry back when you're done." Perhaps to vent the embarrassment caused by my big mother-in-law, my mother-in-law piled on more chores than usual. Father-in-law and Ken were silent, but their stares were clearly malicious. They blocked my way, not letting me step inside the house. So I sighed. "Oh, so you always get treated like this, huh?" Peeking out from behind me was big mother-in-law. Actually, big mother-in-law had asked me to come here. Seeing her, the three stiffened up even more. Noticing the large bags big mother-in-law was carrying, their expressions grew more tense. "Mom, you came all this way even though you're busy." For the first time in a while, father-in-law spoke up, only to be glared at by big mother-in-law. "You guys are the ones piling on unnecessary work, even though you know she's busy. From what I've seen, it seems like a little trouble wouldn't make you reflect on your actions." Big mother-in-law said this and handed one bag each to father-in-law and Ken. Yes, upset with their behavior at today's dinner, big mother-in-law had decided to move in for a while to discipline the three. During this time, she advised me to go back to my parents' house, and even said that if things didn't improve, it might be best to consider divorce. We're about to start a fun living together. I'm so excited that I ended up bringing a lot of stuff to make Jennifer turn her attention back to Ken, and for you too to remember the love you once had. I'm going to guide you wholeheartedly. The first time I saw big mother-in-law's smile, it seemed to have a mysterious charm that was both unsettling yet comforting. The next day, I contacted my parents and decided to take a short trip back to my childhood home. Ken tried to take advantage of this, and snatched my phone, insisting he'd come with me. Before I could stop him, my dad shouted over the phone, "If you're the kind of man who stands by while my daughter is mistreated, she's better off without you. Don't show your face again." Ken ended up feeling down once again. After neglecting me for so long, I was stunned to see Ken shamelessly trying to lean on my parents. Whatever affection I had left for him vanished completely. Knowing full well how fiery his mother-in-law's temperament was, it seemed like Ken agreed to live with her because he was scared of refusing. He put me in the firing line, hoping to escape her wrath. Father-in-law probably has a similar nature. He too would remain silent even when Ken was being chastised. I hope from now on all three will be educated by the much scarier big mother-in-law and become more decent human beings. However, ever since then, while I've been relaxing at my childhood home, I receive calls almost daily. Most of the time, it's mother-in-law, but occasionally it's father-in-law or Ken. "Can you ask big mother-in-law to leave?" In short, he says this over and over again without hesitation. With me gone, all three are being thoroughly trained in household chores by big mother-in-law, and they tell me they're sore all over every day. On top of the physical exhaustion, they can't take out their frustrations on a daughter-in-law, so the atmosphere at home is constantly tense. It's not just big mother-in-law. Apparently, she's been calling over relatives unannounced for surprise inspections. The three of them are made to entertain the guests, spending their days in a state of constant tension. All three kept playing the victim, saying things like, "Kick out the big mother-in-law and come back. Why are we going through this?" So, I declared our divorce over the phone. Normally, it's something to be discussed face to face, but given how they treated me poorly, I figured I wasn't in the wrong to do it this way. With the mediation of the big mother-in-law, the divorce process was completed smoothly. I continued to stay at my childhood home, searched for a job, and decided to start a new life. Half a year later, a minor incident occurred at my workplace. Shockingly, my ex-husband, along with my in-laws, had tracked down my workplace and showed up unannounced. I wondered where the leak had come from, but then I got a call from big mother-in-law. She told me the letter Jennifer sent was opened without permission. Maybe that's how they found out. I calmed down the apologetic big mother-in-law and assured her that there was no harm done. At the entrance of my company, three of them were restrained by multiple security guards. Watching quietly from the floor above, I noticed they were repeatedly mentioning my name. They probably couldn't stand the scolding from big mother-in-law any longer. But mother-in-law used to curse me with foul words every day, and both father-in-law and Ken turned a blind eye. So it's no surprise they're in this situation now. I don't feel the slightest sympathy for them being manhandled by security, and I don't want them in my sight anymore. Besides, I already had someone special in my life. This person respects my feelings but also confidently shares his own opinions. He's someone I can really rely on. To be honest, I'm not yet brave enough to think about marriage, but I'm going to take it slow and nurture our love.
Becca, you're still such an unthoughtful and worthless wife as always. This was a trip that my son and I were looking forward to. You, who have no part in this, can go home right away. So my mother-in-law starts nagging me the moment my husband leaves the table. We were on an overseas trip that my husband asked me to plan. Well, if she goes that far, it's inevitable I'll go home. What happens to the two of them after that is none of my concern. My name is Becca, a married woman working for a multinational corporation. Since my job is easy to manage in terms of schedule, I've been working mostly remotely since getting married, so I spend more time at home. My husband Jack is the type who overvalues himself and always wants to look good. He's a big spender and has never contributed a penny to our household. I didn't realize this while we were dating, but after we got married and started living together, his true nature gradually emerged. His mother seems to enjoy bragging about her son. I've heard of mothers who dote on their sons. I was prepared for that to some extent, and was willing to tolerate it. But she is obstinate and strong-willed. She doesn't listen to other people's opinions. She even completely ignores her husband's opinions because she believes that her son is the best. She doesn't like me at all. Every time we meet, she always has some snide remark. She seems to particularly dislike the fact that I live comfortably on my son's salary alone. She keeps nagging me, saying, "You're still young, you should work outside." I've explained many times that I continue to work after marriage and that I have a job that I can do from home. But in her mind, working from home is just a part-time job. She assumes that I'm just pretending to work by always looking at my computer. She presumes that I'm probably playing games. Apparently, I'm a worthless wife who doesn't do housework properly and only plays computer games despite being a stay-at-home wife. My husband, of course, understands my work style, but he has never explained it to his mother, even when it's said right in front of him. He turns a blind eye. Even when I asked him to explain it well, he says he wants us women to handle it well and completely throws it at me. He even says he doesn't want to get involved in troubles. Once, when I persistently asked him to do something similar, he threw a completed divorce paper at me. It urged me to be treated like that, but I thought about divorcing him. But I heard that getting a divorce is more difficult than getting married. It would be a problem if it were more difficult than the current situation, so I ended up giving in to my husband's argument. I understood that my husband prioritizes his mother in everything. It's frustrating, but I feel like I need to find a way to deal with her while skillfully deflecting her. I didn't agree to divorce because of this change in my feelings, but it seems that my husband thinks I'm head over heels for him and didn't want to break up. His pompous attitude is getting worse day by day. It's cute when a child tries to act grown up, but when an adult does it, it's rather a turnoff. I've learned to ignore his pompous words and act as if I haven't seen his actions. There is another reason why I didn't divorce him. Due to my husband's job, we live quite a distance from my in-laws. We meet once a year, or at most, twice a year. I thought I could tolerate that much. While the world was making a fuss about having 9 consecutive days off, if you take a vacation on weekdays, both my husband and I were working. In my case, American holidays don't matter much because I adjust my schedule according to international circumstances. As for my husband, it's just that he wasn't taking 9 consecutive days off according to the calendar. When he returned home after his first day back at work, he announced, "Let's go on an overseas trip." When I asked him what he was talking about, he said that his colleagues had taken a vacation and made it a 9-day holiday to go on an overseas trip, and he was quite proud of it, which made him incredibly annoyed and regretful. I was dumbfounded by his childishness, but I haven't been on a trip this year, so I suggested a domestic trip. The reason being, my husband has no experience with overseas trips, so if we were to go overseas, he would have to apply for a passport. "There won't be a problem if you're with me. You're fluent in multiple languages," he said. I studied abroad when I was a student and had been on many overseas trips when I was single. In addition to English, I can hold a conversation in Spanish and a bit of Chinese if necessary. When my mother back home got hooked on Korean dramas, I studied Korean with her. However, I didn't get much opportunity to use it, so I'm not very confident. Sure, compared to my husband, I might be good at languages, but that doesn't mean that applying for passports will be finished in a snap. I tried to persuade him to go abroad during the summer or winter, but he wouldn't listen at all. On the contrary, despite having no experience, he decided on the country to visit, took leave without permission, and told me to make it work on the schedule. "It's not a tour. Why should I have to act with strangers?" He furthermore declared. He said that English is a universal language and that we should have no problem if it's just the two of us. I thought maybe it's fine, but before I knew it, he said, "That's right. I promised to take Mom along. I'll count on you for that too. Your mother-in-law too. Even for me, taking care of 2 inexperienced people abroad is too much. You should show some filial piety once in a while. Maybe you can gain some favor by doing so. Our entire kind and good husband, this is for your own good, Becca. You should be grateful." He said things that made it seem like he was doing me a favor, but arguing against it started to seem foolish. I decided to quietly make reservations as my husband instructed, and I came up with another good idea. Starting from applying for my mother-in-law and husband's passports, booking flights and hotel reservations, It's a lot of trouble, but in order to implement my idea, I patiently fulfilled all my husband's wishes and created a perfect schedule. On the day of the overseas trip, my mother-in-law, who knows nothing of my troubles, cheerfully and childishly exclaimed, "Just as I expected from my son. It's a long journey overseas. The seats are business class, aren't they?" Knowing my husband, he probably said something like, "I'll take you there." He probably bragged about himself, saying things like, "I made the reservations and planned the schedule." The truth is, I did everything, and my husband did nothing. They did nothing, and left all the procedures to me. What's more, the two of them, who have hardly any experience with airports, moved around on their own while I was doing the procedures. They walked around aimlessly, even when it was boarding time, and I had a hard time finding them. The airport staff even asked, "Would you like us to make a call announcement? It's Becca's fault for not telling us the boarding gate." It was such a fuss, but they showed no remorse, saying, "And this wife was planning to have fun by herself, leaving us behind." During the flight, they behaved relatively quietly, but it was honestly annoying and embarrassing every time they called a flight attendant. Several hours later, we arrived in the destination country. After finishing immigration procedures and such, just when I thought I could finally head straight to the hotel and take a break, my husband turned pale and said, "I'm going to the bathroom," and thrust his luggage at me and ran away. I don't understand why only my husband got sick when we ate the same thing. He had been grinning and calling his favorite flight attendant. I guess this is his divine punishment. Serves him right. "Becca, you really are an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. How long are you planning to stay here?" My mother-in-law said, "This trip, my son planned it for me. It's a mother-son trip without the need for a daughter-in-law. You're a money grabber who doesn't even work. How brazen of you to think you can enjoy this trip for free. Go home now." "Are you sure? Whether it's good or bad, I can't have fun when you're here." "I see. That's not good. All right then. I'll go home now." I handed my husband's luggage back to my mother-in-law, only taking my carry-on, and turned my back to her. My mother-in-law, who received my husband's luggage, was stunned and had a very vacant expression on her face. It's not possible for her to react like that when she told me to go home. I was doing my best to hold back my laughter. My husband seemed to have been going in and out of the bathroom several times, so we didn't cross paths. Luckily, I was able to get a ticket back to America, so I became a passenger on the plane headed there. Originally, I had planned to find a chance to return home alone. If we had a good relationship, I wouldn't mind being taken around as a tour guide, but not with that mother and son. It's only stressful for me, and I will gain nothing. I can't stop grinning just thinking about what the two of them, who can't speak anything but English, will do when they are left behind. If they think a little, they should be able to manage with the translation function of their smartphone app. But I can't imagine my husband, who likes to show off and inflate his own importance, doing something like that. When I safely returned back after making a few detours, I headed straight to the luxury hotel where my parents were waiting. My husband Jack told me to show respect from my parents, so I treated them to a luxury trip in upstate New York. They were to travel there leisurely on a popular scenic route, enjoying the scenery and meals along the way. I managed to meet up with them earlier than planned, much to their surprise. When I briefly explained the situation, they were taken aback. They were astounded that I had agreed to such a request from Jack. My phone was bombarded with calls and messages from Jack, all of which I ignored. I switched off my phone and enjoyed this day to my heart's content. When I returned home after partying with my parents, I received a call from the embassy. According to their explanation, Jack had returned from the restroom to find his mother, my mother-in-law, sitting alone. Despite being surprised that I was not there, he was livid. He tried to contact me but couldn't get through, so he decided to make his way to the hotel by himself. However, not knowing where to go, he was visibly flustered when a kind person spoke to him in broken English. He was led away after being told that they knew the place and would take him there, only to be robbed of all his money, passport, and valuables. My mother-in-law was even stripped of her jewelry. When he was found standing on the street looking destitute, the police picked him up and referred him to the embassy for help. That's how he was able to contact me. The embassy official asked me to come and pick him up. He couldn't withdraw money because his wallet, which contained his bank cards, had been stolen. However, I asked back why I, a stranger, had to do that. I explained that I was already divorced from the man who was there. The truth was, I had kept the divorce papers he had thrown at me some time ago. Back then, I decided not to proceed with a divorce as I had heard it would be a lot of trouble. But this time, I had reached my limit. After filling in the divorce papers, I headed to the hotel right after landing back in the States. To my surprise, the divorce was accepted without any fuss. I already had a new place lined up, and the contract had been signed while making the travel arrangements. I didn't want to use the furniture I had shared with Jack. It made my skin crawl. In my new place, I planned to buy everything new, so I packed for both a trip and the move at the same time. All I need to bring to the new place is my work tools and my favorite clothes. I could easily have everything else sent by the courier at a specified date and time. The embassy staff did not ask anything more from me, and the conversation ended. Later, it seems my former mother-in-law had pleaded with my former father-in-law, and with his help, my ex-husband Jack and ex-mother-in-law were able to return to the States. However, Jack, who had blown his top, contacted me. "You left me and divorced me without my knowledge, abandoned," he exclaimed. "No, I just obeyed your mother's instructions to leave. If you have any complaints, talk to your mom, and please consider the business class flight I arranged for you on your return as my farewell gift," I responded. I also reminded him that he was the one who had first brought up the divorce papers. I only filed the divorce papers he had prepared, fulfilling his wish for a divorce, I clarified. "Do you think such sophistry will work? How much more do you want to embarrass me?" Jack retorted. "Embarrassed? How so? If you want to feel embarrassed." "I have a better story. Want to hear it?" "What is it?" "Well, did you know you're a regular at an adult entertainment club? You're pretty invested in a favorite girl there, aren't you? Rather than contributing money to the household, you are heavily splurging on her. But you ended up in debt when her demands escalated. I had an investigation agency look into a debt collection letter addressed to Jack that had been delivered to our house. Although Jack was a good spender, his obsessive behavior seemed to be a turnoff. His favorite girl's true feelings were that she thought he would eventually stop coming if she kept asking for more money and expensive gifts. I wonder what Jack felt when he heard that. That's quite an embarrassing story, isn't it? If you make any more fuss or contact me again, I'll spill the beans to your company. Got it. Being disliked by the girl he was infatuated with would be an unbearable humiliation for Jack, considering his personality. If this became known, it would be a great embarrassment. Jack, who until now had been aggressive, just said, "Goddard," in a feeble voice and ended the call. A few days later, my ex-father-in-law contacted me. He told me he had also divorced his wife, my ex-mother-in-law. I thought it was unnecessary as we were no longer related, but it seems he contacted me to expose my ex-mother-in-law's true nature, as we both have been treated poorly by her. My former father-in-law, suspicious of his wife's behavior, investigated while she was out and discovered that his retirement savings had been depleted. The money was apparently spent on beauty treatments and cosmetic procedures. As I'm not familiar with such things, I was totally unaware. When asked for a women's perspective, I was stumped because I hadn't noticed it either. I guess seeing someone only once a year makes changes more noticeable, but I truly hadn't picked up on anything. I even asked my former father-in-law, "Are you sure it's for beauty treatments?" She seems to have sunk quite a bit into it, but there's no visible change. Perhaps there were slight changes that only my former mother-in-law could notice. It felt like throwing money down the drain. Naturally, my former mother-in-law, who was kicked out penniless, turned to her son, Jack. However, Jack, the backbone of the family, is up to his eyeballs in debt after his divorce from me. He even lost his apartment for failing to pay the rent. Now he and his mother seem to be living in a drafty, run-down apartment. Yet, his mother has no intention of working and won't quit her beauty treatments. On top of repaying his debts, the burden of his mother's beauty expenses is weighing heavily on Jack, who I hear is working around the clock. It seems the vanity of wanting to present a larger-than-life image, even in the face of a declining living standard, doesn't change. If they're content with this situation, I won't say another word.